Thank you. Thank you so much. I hail from St. Paul, where I live with my family, but I work all over the country, and it's certainly a pleasure to join you on your journey as we move together these next couple of years towards a sense of greater clarity, strength, mission, hope, and of course, a vision to where God is taking you as a congregation. One of the things you should know is this is not my story. This is your story. I am a facilitator for a process that helps to gather wide varieties of views and stories and bring them together. So I don't have an agenda for you. I come just with big listening ears and spend lots of time with congregations listening to where the Holy Spirit is speaking and where the Holy Spirit is calling you. So you should have this little guy. Yeah? Pastor Chris? That's okay. What you should know before I begin is that I have a ginormous report. If anyone has insomnia, these are wonderful tools to help you sleep. That is available in the church office, and I would ask that you would sit with Pastor Chris, Rick, or other members of the council or board to walk through this because it's really deep and dense, and you might need some help kind of unearthing it. But just know that's available if you'd like to see some of the data. I, as a person of faith, believe that while we have great institutions of church, colleges, and seminaries, and camps, and social service agencies, all doing God's work, the congregation is where we most are surrounded most intimately with the face of Christ. These relationships, these opportunities for worship and learning, these faces that we see again and again, and some new ones, are the most intimate experience we have of a loving God who embraces us, loves us, forgives us, makes us live in community with other sinners too, which is not easy. But the congregation is the most important place in my journey as I come to understand a walk of faith. And so we need to steward this congregation, this faithful community, to make sure that we're taking good care. As Pastor Chris was talking about, it's not about us, really. We're the faithful already here who've already been redeemed, created and redeemed, saved, sanctified, and sent. We need to steward this for people who aren't here yet. Those that God misses most, right? Those who have a longing. And it's a good place for us to become renewed. So in all, it's a good time to take a good look at your congregation, take an honest look, as those are not always fun. Anyone who's aging and looks in the mirror, sometimes that's not always fun. But I'm here to share with you what I heard, and we've put a plan together for next steps to help you get more clarity for the future. So this purpose mapping process actually comes from the story of Joshua. Well, one of the stories in the book of Joshua, where Moses and the Israelites get to the edge of the promised land, and of course they're exhausted, and they're wondering, what is this new land going to be like? Is it going to be just exactly like what we've experienced, or might it be different? And so, knowing that they needed to be a little smarter, they decided to send some scouts, some people to do reconnaissance into this promised land. Tell us what you find. Where's the river? Where's the water? Where's their good grazing? Who do we need to watch out for? So Joshua was among those, and thus the name the Joshua group. So Joshua and some scouts went and found the land of milk and honey. But he also found giants and big rocks and things to watch out for. And came back, and the scouts gave their report. It was a little while before they made it to the promised land, but that was one group of people who decided their future deserved to have kind of a thoughtful peek into what was coming. And so this is called the purpose mapping process, and it's based on that story of Joshua. So if you'll open up your little folder here. So what did we do? How did we get here? Again, this is not my story, this is your story, so I get to share with you what you told me. So what did we do? We listened a lot. We did the missional assessment profile. There was almost 500 people who took that online survey. About 62% of your weekly average worship attendance, which is fantastic. And that gives us numbers, right? That was a survey with numbers. So we got some data, some quantitative data. Then I came back and I spent a lot of time, over 3 days, 3.5 days, talking with members, staff, leaders, youth group, everybody, to hear a little bit about what are your hopes and dreams? What do you hope happens here? What do you sense you're being called to as a congregation? What are you scared about? Thinking ahead about what's coming in this next era of ministry as you sharpen your missional pencil and get ready to do some focusing. It's good to hear from the people because congregations are not like businesses. They're not like nonprofits. They're a body, which can get messy, by the way, but we're a body. And so the Holy Spirit works and moves and lives and breathes in all of you, and that's why we include the congregation in this listening. Then we had 2 community listening panels. Did anybody go? Raise your hand. Good. So there was one in Madison and one in Verona, and it was an exercise, certainly not the end all, but it was a beginning exercise to listen. Listen to what's happening outside of the church building. What's happening in the neighborhoods? What's happening in the businesses, in the homes? What are the needs? What are people longing for? What are people scared about? Where do people need help? And that is a fantastic discipline, I think, for everybody, but especially a congregation who's hoping to serve neighbor, to listen and know neighbor. So we had 2 of those. Then we did a leadership systems inventory that was done by staff, current board, and the last 3 years of board. I can't remember if it was 3 or 2. And then I looked at your data, your financial data. So I took all of that. You should see how thick this is. I didn't even print everything. There was a lot of data to go through. And that is the process by which we continue to bring together the stories to see and sift through those to see what's happening. So before we start on a journey to create a vision, we first need to figure out where we are, right? When you go to AAA and you used to ask for maps and triptychs, remember those? You have to figure out where you're starting from, because if you just get the map to Vegas and you're still in Connecticut, it doesn't help you. So you need to figure out where you are, where you're starting from, so we can put together a path to move forward. So here's where you are. This is what you told me. So assets and affirmations, these are the good things. This is the strengths, the things that are going really, really well. And I want to commend your leaders for their courage, frankly, to invite somebody to look under the hood, right? Somebody to dig deep and find out the heartbeat of this congregation. So thanks to leaders, and thanks to you for participating. You love your church. You love what God's up to here. You love each other. You're thankful for a rich history, a really beautiful history. And it's exciting to be a part of this. So thank you for everyone for participating. So top affirmations. You have a fantastic reputation in the community, both locations actually, and your facilities are gorgeous. And the reason I say this is there are a lot of churches who really are they're in struggle because their congregations are under some duress and their facilities are also in duress, and they don't know, is now a good time to raise a lot of money to fix that, or how do we move forward? So the fact that you have gorgeous facilities, fantastically located, are known in the community and seen as a fantastic resource, you are in a really strong spot. Strong outreach and willingness to partner with organizations. Over and over I heard from people saying, we take this really seriously, that we want to be relevant and helpful and real and present to the neighborhood. We're not just an enclave of people who worship a God who says, yeah, I loved you and I saved you, and now keep it to yourself. Right? So we believe wholeheartedly here, as I'm talking about you all believe wholeheartedly that part of the journey is to walk with neighbors and serve and care and be present. So that's a strong sense of your DNA, and I heard great things about that. Sense of welcome. People were feeling like there's a friendly tone to this congregation, that people are feeling welcomed, that we like to greet each other, we like to talk to one another and get to know one another. There is a sense of you are welcome here. You can be part of this family. Another strength is that you're currently moving to a system of greater lay involvement, lay people being the members, yes? And more involvement with kind of day-to-day ministries. And that seems to be really exciting and kind of igniting some fire in people, understanding how the connection to service in the church and outside the church are part of their own journeys. The next, presence of multi-generations. I can tell you right now, you are blessed to have those little people and middle people and growing people in your midst. There are a lot of churches who say if we could just get young people, if we could just have children, we would be vital. So you have a great gift. There's great responsibility, of course, right? If you have little people in your midst or growing people in your midst. But fantastic, multiple generations crossing over, giving you this rich woven fabric of a congregation that can provide all kinds of perspectives and wonderfully engaging relationships between the generations. There is a hunger for deeper connection. And I sense that as the world gets busier and spins faster and faster, hopefully they're not coming here. Okay, we're good. As the world gets going faster and faster, there's a deep hunger to rest, as we had Sabbath this morning, we talked about Sabbath, but also deep connections with other people. We're tired of spinning and being on our phones and having short, really shallow relationships, and so a hunger to be with people who believe what we believe, or at least are willing to dig down and engage in the big questions of life. Another gift you have is a big diversity in your congregation, and I don't mean racial diversity, but almost every other kind after that. So you have socioeconomic, you have obviously campuses pulling people from all over the place. You have quite a range of ideologies and political views, which doesn't happen very much anymore. There's not very many places where we gather where not everybody's exactly like us. And that's rich, if we can embrace that and make sure that we focus on the things that bring us together. There's an opportunity for growth and giving. When we looked at the financial information, there are resources that people have been gifted with in their lives, and the amount of giving currently to the church does not match that. So there's certainly room for growth in generosity here, which is exciting as we look forward to making sure that we keep our annual ministry with a stewardship appeal healthy and vibrant. Then we also deal with the debt that allows us to live out the dream in Verona as we shape a vision forward. There's lots of room for that, and that indeed is good news. Hunger for deeper faith, integrated and inspiring worship. This makes me happy when people want to learn more, dig deeper, experiment really with worship, trying to find ways that engage people's imaginations about how one worships and learns and grows and serves. So we might have to be thinking a little bit differently about how we try some things to see if we can engage some of that imagination. Strong children and youth groups, that's not a surprise for you. Nice and strong and an appreciation for all those little people that we saw and the growing people that we saw, knowing that that's a key part of what makes your heart beat here at Good Shepherd. That the presence of those young people are part of a very, very special part of your congregation. So let's go on to challenges and needs. These are always a little harder, but it's also good for us to figure out where we are on the map. And you can't just go with one. You have to find the other to find your exact spot, right? So you guys have been through a lot. You've been through a lot. You've had a lot in the last, 5 years or so. A lot of pastoral transition, a lot of sadness. That's a lot of pastors to lose in one short time. Pastors who've been here a long time and were much beloved and who did great ministry, and you had kind of gotten into some good rhythms. And so to say goodbye to those people is hard and sad. Kind of an end of an era, certainly. So there's some grief still working itself out with your congregation. And then new people come in, and interims, and then the calling of Pastor Chris and Joe. And then we had some transitions in staff as we looked at our finances. And that just makes you feel like you're not quite sure what's up and what's down. It starts to make you feel like, whoa, maybe I don't know what's happening. I go to church and I'm not sure what's going on. So just to acknowledge the grief and the loss that comes with transition. Even if fantastic people leave and fantastic people come, there's just a time for us to kind of celebrate and then let go and be ready to move on. It's probably felt a little, not unstable, but maybe a little wobbly for a while as you move through an interim time. So I want to let you know that that's completely normal. If you didn't, that meant you didn't care. So this is a congregation that lives very close to its heart. And so I think it's okay that you're sad about that transition and loss. And then as we think about how new pastors come into a system that we're used to the way the old pastors did it, previous pastors, right? We had a rhythm with, let's see, it was Brent and Rod and Tim. Are those the ones that left, right? Oh, good. It's been a couple weeks since I last said those names, so I want to make sure I had the right ones. So if we're used to the way that those pastors do their work and build the leadership systems to do that, and then we call somebody else with maybe a different set of skills and gifts and an expectation that this congregation, for its own health and benefit, needs to move towards a more lay-led way to organize your ministry, because it's just healthier at this point in the life of Christian churches. Sometimes those new relationships, as you bring in a new leader, has expectations, and the congregation has expectations, and sometimes they don't always fit right away. So I would imagine that there's some kind of getting used to new leadership styles and new ways of being together and connecting and embracing your pastors, the new pastors, Joe and Chris. So we're going to be thinking deeply about how we can make sure that this congregation enjoys the close connection that it has with its pastors, or that it's used to, that we find ways for you to connect with those pastors in a meaningful way, and just make sure that y'all feel loved, because I think that's what people are looking for. Leadership, decision-making, communication, and financial clarity. Yes, we need those things. So there is nothing wrong with your leadership. It's just not very clear. So because especially you're coming out of a time when the pastors in the previous generation had a certain way of doing things, a little bit more in a clergy-centric style that was very, very common and was a best practice in the Lutheran Church in America, of which you came. It was very, very common in those days to have a pastor who was a little bit more in charge of the running of the church. And that was kind of the polity. That was the way it went. So when you move away from that, some of the systems you need to get going weren't quite ready to go, or kind of learning how to rev on their own. So if you invite Pastor Chris to be your pastor, and he's interested in moving you to a much more lay-led, you're learning how to do that as the congregation. So there's some clarity that we need to find. What does the board do? What do the committees do, those new committees? What do the staff do? What does the congregation do? And how do we know who's doing what? So we're going to work on making sure you know who's in leadership, what they talk about, making sure you understand ways that you can give feedback or participate in listening about key issues that are facing the church, and making sure that that's all tidy, including financial reporting, so that you kind of know what's going on. Is that a thumbs up? We like that? Okay, good. I'm seeing nodding. Strategy and planning and worship for music experiences. There's a strong sense that worship is central for you, and you love it. But just being a little bit thoughtful about the entire worship experience across both campuses, right? So making sure as we look at our Sunday morning or Saturday or Sunday night experiences, being really thoughtful about how We prepare those, plan for experiences that are transformational, are inspiring, engage people using their gifts, and are just really thoughtful about how we do worship across the entire congregation in both locations. The need for clarity and purpose is the next one. I heard this a lot, and that's good because that's what they told me when they said we were going to start this process, so it means that we're right on. There's nothing wrong with Good Shepherd. Hear me. There is nothing wrong. But sometimes when the world shifts around you, that's a good time to focus because we can't be all things for all people in all places. So it's time for us to get in alignment with God's mission for this place. And I speak for both campuses. What giftedness do you have? What passions do you bring? What are the needs around you that might inform how you do that work? And then how would you move forward into that plan? So definitely a sense of where are we going? Where are we going? So we'll be talking about that in a little bit. And a desire for belonging and connection of ministries. So you're very welcoming, we said, but sometimes we don't know what to do with new people after we say hi. We were like, great, I did my job. I said hello and got my coffee. But how would they experience congregations? And especially if they don't have a big church background, if they're not well-versed in how to navigate, it can be really confusing. You think about the gazillions of ministries you have here. The offerings are immense. And if all those things are equal, we welcome people to chaos. So we're going to be doing some thinking about a pathway of belonging, how people come and engage, how they might bump up against long enough with other people to have relationships, how we might find out their gifts and where they want to serve, and then find kind of a healthy way for them to become part of the congregation. Most congregations, it's just kind of throwing people in and hoping they can swim. So we want to be really thoughtful because we're serious about engaging people who come into the congregation. So let's be thoughtful about how we engage new people. And then the other part of that connection of ministries, what do the ministries have to do with our mission? How are they connected? How are they living out our mandate, our missional mandate? And if they're not, how do we decide if there's a better way to do that? So we're going to give ourselves some ways of understanding how those ministries live out our mission and how we might be able to be a little more thoughtful about shaping them so that they do what we want them to do. Is there any huge questions, burning questions right now? Okay. So we're going to be talking about the travel plan, but before we do that, there's a key term down here. I also have a measurement for your missional readiness. That is your ability to flex, to be changeable, to adapt. Of course, all of us can adapt, but some of us do it a little more easily or faster or less painfully than others. So I would say you guys are moderate. You don't mind change, but you're not jumping in and looking for innovations here and there. Certainly looking for the why we would do something and making sure that it's lined up and we've thought carefully about it before we do any kind of change. So we want to be thoughtful about how we invite people to imagine any kind of shifting or changing that might come out of your imaginations in the vision work. So, travel plan. What are we going to do next? Now that we know where we are, how are we going to get to where we want to be? So these are called waypoints. There's 5 waypoints. And what we found in our work over the last 30 or so years is if congregations can get their arms around 5 different areas of church life, they have a better chance of being healthy and vital and ready for the future. Those are leadership, making sure all your leadership systems are in place and they're all lined up and that they're doing what they're supposed to do. They're working, all the pistons are firing. The next one is shared vision. That we have a vision for the future that calls us out of comfort zones even, that pulls us to a future we would imagine together, and that is shared. It is not the council's vision, or the pastor's vision, or Rick's vision, or my vision. It is your vision together. So there's very important things that we have to do to make sure it represents the people. The third one is generosity. Making sure that we are imagining ourselves, since we have been given all the gifts from God in the first place. We are God's. How do we live in that generous spirit? Not only of money, but of the way you talk, the way you think about each other, the way you imagine the other people who are meeting over at the Verona campus and vice versa, the way we share stories, the way we share our presence as people want to get to know us and connect with us, how present are we, the way we share our time, and of course the way we share our resources. We want to be overflow people. We want to be cascading generosity. Because we have a God who's like this, you see, and he calls us to the life of overflow. The next one is story. It's kind of got two parts to it. One is communication. As you can imagine, who's overwhelmed with all the communication tools that are out there right now? Email, social media, websites. Come on, you know you are. Don't be shy. Okay. So just because we have more does not mean it's easier to communicate. Sometimes it makes it more complicated. And so we are going to be working with the communication staff and leadership to making sure we have a strategic communication plan for communicating to the congregation and all the leadership hubs we have with staff and committees and councils and boards. And so we want to make sure that that's in tip-top shape because that's hard these days and you have to be really intentional about it. The second part of story is being a story people. People are starving for stories. They're hungry for stories that have meaning and connection, belonging, that remind you who you are, why you were created, how we're supposed to live. So we're living in a world where there's definitely a deficit. And we want to be the ones to stand up and learn how to share our faith stories, invite people to be a part of our congregation, be able to be in the communities around us with a story of hope and grace with our own personal stories, as well as Good Shepherds. The last one is faith integration. These are the things like worship and education and service opportunities and small groups and stuff like that, kind of the avenues of how we live out our faith, and certainly very, very important. These are not, I didn't say them in the order that they should be in, but those are the 5. So I have recommendations for every single one of those areas for you. You ready? All right. Leadership. So we're going to work to clarify roles. We're going to communicate structure and process and provide financial clarity. That's my promise to you. We're going to work really hard to make sure you know exactly what's happening, what's in front of the leadership at this time, find ways for you to know what's on the hearts and minds, be able to pray and support them, contact people, find out who does what, so that we can have a sense that we're all in this together. Shared vision. We are definitely going to start a visioning process, and I'll tell you about that next. And that's going to be really important as you move forward. Generosity. We're going to be creating a new narrative. You've been through some hard times in the last 5 years, and we're going to continue to shape a story of strength and health because you are. And you're in an exciting place. You're really positioned amazingly well for the challenges that are facing you. So we're going to be thinking about stewardship for annual ministry, making sure that that is center, and we're taking really good care of the annual ministry. And then also making sure that we take good care of our debt, and that we do a capital campaign that will help us relieve some of that debt and continue to provide one of the most awesome second sites I've ever been a part of. You are really gifted and blessed with that. Story. We talked about having a strategic communications process that we're going to be working on to communicate with you and also leadership stuff. And then faith integration, we're going to continue to think about how we engage people through intentional ways of inviting people to belong, to be part of things. We're going to work on adult faith development, making sure you feel connected to one another in deep and important ways, and then making sure that our worship is thoughtful and intentional and strategic across all the sites, both sites. So, are there any questions? I'm going to tell you where we're going next. starting this summer, but any questions about my waypoints there? We're on board? You had enough coffee? We're good? Okay. So the next steps, because the communication stuff gets done by staff, I'm going to work really closely with staff and the administration to make sure that we get that strategic communication plan going fast. So we're not going to use communication. Well, we'll use the communication team that's already up, correct, Rick? We already have one? Yes. So we're using that existing team. The two teams that we're going to craft or shape or create will be around leadership and shared vision. The reason I'm only doing two is because that's really all any congregation can handle at one time. You're very, very, very busy. And so we want you to have, your bandwidth tells me that we only can handle two kind of big things at a time. So we're going to work on creating a leadership team, about 8 people or so, that's going to help us kind of clarify roles, the committees, the board. You call it a board, yes? Yes. Every church seems to call it something else, so I just want to make sure. A board, the committees, what the staff does, what the pastors do, lay engagement, and we're going to make sure all those are lined up and clear. So that's that job, and to communicate that. The shared vision team is going to work with me, probably about 8 people as well, to clarify some things. Rick, let's go through our PowerPoint now. Did you lose it?
There we go.
So this is one of my favorite verses from Philippians, from the Message version, which all these verses are very familiar to you, but sometimes when you read it in a different translation or paraphrase, as this is, it sometimes might strike you a little different. Summing it all up, friends, I'd say you do best by filling your minds and meditating on things true, noble, reputable, authentic, compelling, gracious, the best, not the worst, the beautiful, not the ugly, things to praise, not things to curse. Put into practice what you learned from me, what you heard and saw and realized. Do that, and God, who makes everything work together, will work you into his most excellent harmonies. Isn't that pretty? Go ahead. So this is a quote. One of the things that we're going to do is be talking about how you are unique, because your vision is not somebody else's vision, and not another church's, not some church in Chicago or Minneapolis or Dallas. So this is from Eugene Peterson, who actually happened to write the Message. In the life of faith, each person, or you could say congregation, discovers all the elements of a unique and original adventure. We are prevented from following in one another's footsteps and are called to an incomparable association with Christ. The Bible makes it clear that every time there is a story of faith, it is completely original. God's creative genius is endless. He never, fatigued and unable to maintain the rigors of creativity, resorts to mass-producing copies. You are unique. You are unique. You can't just copy 10 steps to a better church. It doesn't work that way. You have been called to be you. And so we're going to do some, go ahead, we're going to do some clarifying for you. We're going to skip Molly's story. So the purpose is for you to be unique, to move from strategy and methodology to identity, and to find your vision instead of focusing on personalities or programs or some of those details, places. Go ahead. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the why. We're going to do a little exercise. Can you throw me your marker? Thank you. Whatever's darker, probably that one. Ooh! What a guy, huh? Nobody serves me like that. That's awesome. So one of the things, if I fall off, you'll just have to laugh. Makes me very nervous. I have a very dangerous job. All right. So has anybody ever heard of Simon Sinek and the Golden Circle? Yes. So that's what we're going to talk about. I don't know, you can see it. Oh, these are wonderful markers. Step 1, markers. Here we go. I got it. It's okay. Thank you. Okay, you can kind of see it up there too, a little bit. So the outside is what? The middle is how, and the middle is why. And every church, every organization on the planet, right, knows what we do. So yell out, what do? We got worship. What else? We have Sunday school or children's, what do you call it? Church school. Huh? Amped. Food pantry. Clothes closet. Music. Choirs. Loaves and fishes. Holy cow. Transitional housing. Sorry? Prime timers. Stephen's ministry. Bible studies, women's circles. Orchard Ridge stuff, yep. Camping. Handbells. Quilters group. We got more than can fit in here, but you know what I'm saying. So we all know what we do, right? And this is often how we define ourselves. We're a church that has programs, right? I would say in here is also you have a building as a tool. You have pastors. I'm not going to say you're a tool. At least not in front of you. No, I'm just kidding. Pastors, we have a building, we have leadership, right? We have staff. We have all kinds of tools to get the work done. So we very often find ourselves defining ourselves by our whats, right? Very few of us define ourselves by our why. And typically people are drawn, if you think of new people, we want to grow, we want to reach more people. People engage with you because of your why. They have a sense of what's important to you. They get a feeling for your values, how you care for one another, what's important to you, who you worship, who you rely on. So our job is to help ourselves fall back in love with this so very clearly that this becomes kind of our defining identity. So we're going to do some work on clarifying that. And, the hows, by the way, are things like we believe worship is worship and sacraments, the preached word. You are on Whitney and Raymond, and I don't remember the address of the other one. You have some very specific things. We're ELCA Lutheran in terms of your speaking a word of grace, right? Saved by grace through faith. So there's some things about how you do what you do, but these are the whats. And sometimes these get so powerful because we've lived with these ways of doing church, these actually become church to us. And we get so moved by our experiences in here, we want to hold on to these things no matter what, because they've been so important to us. They have been where we have received a moment of grace, a sense of forgiveness, a feeling of community, an awesome feeling like my gifts are being used. This is kind of where the rubber hits the road. But sometimes we get so wrapped up in these things that we can't loosen this. We can't do church another way because we have kind of clinging so tightly. So one of the jobs of leaders is to steward the why, the vision, mission, values of a congregation so that you are freed to imagine anything, right? Not to say that we're going to change everything, because I don't come with any suggestions. But we want to make sure that the things we're doing at this moment, surrounded by this community, in a world that is so hurting, that we are doing exactly what God wants us to do. So we're going to be spending more time falling in love with our why, so we can loosen our hold on the whats, so we can really be open to what God is calling us to. You can keep going. Keep going. There's 3 kind of key areas. We're going to take a look at your local circumstance, kind of what's going on around you, what are the needs in the neighborhood. We've already done some listening there. We're going to look at the gifts and capacities that you have, because you're very gifted. Very gifted church with awesome people and talents and buildings and resources. And then you also have some passions. Definitely, I heard some people with passion, and it started to resonate. Oh, this is a church that loves to do this. Just because you're good at it doesn't mean you get passion, right? So we want to find out where the intersection of all those things are. You can just keep rolling. So we're going to take a look at, all those local circumstances. You can keep going. I hate it when I make PowerPoints with this words coming up slow, because when I want to go fast. Where are the gaps? What is God already doing in our local setting, and where are the gaps? Go ahead. Keep going. Yep, we did the panels. We looked at demographic stuff. We probably will have some conversations. So there's two of our circles. Keep going. So these are some of the questions that I'm looking for when I was talking with you. And at the bottom, what do you need to let go? I don't know what those are, if you have any at all. But that's something to think about, to free yourselves in time and money and energy for what might be next. Go ahead. Yep, so we did the map and the report and the listening groups. We did all this. Yep, so we came up with a travel plan. So we're going to keep going. Rick, you're doing a great job with your little finger there. You're doing awesome. Keep going. So we're going to find out where the three of these things live, the nexus, that little spot where those three things live. And we're going to be, the shared vision team is going to be working on your unique identity. Not that that's a thing that we publish, but really just naming where are we in the context and the needs around us, the circumstances, and how does that intersect with our passions and our giftedness. So we're going to be doing some work on that. And then next, go ahead. These are the three things that we're going to be working on after that. And 5. I can't add. So what are we doing? Which is our compass. That is the thing that tells us it's a mandate, right? It tells us exactly what we should be doing. And if it doesn't fit within that mission, while it might be a great idea, might reach some people, it's probably not for us to do, because we are a very specific set of peoples with gifts and passions and needs around us. Yeah, do you want me to read it? Yep. I will give it to Rick. He can email it out. I will give it to Rick Blum.
We'll put it on the website like this time tomorrow. Always be
Online. Yep. So we'll be doing mission. We'll be clarifying values. We'll be looking at your strategies. How do those ministries that we talked about, all those ministries that you have, how do they align themselves with your mission to make sure that we are doing everything that we want to be doing and not missing something? And then what do we want to measure? How do we know when we're on mission? What does it look like for a person to come into Good Shepherd, into the midst of your ministry? What would they experience? Some of these graduating kids that are leaving, how do we know we've done our mission? What does their life look like? How do we behave towards one another? How do we know we're on mission, being a grace-filled place, right? And then we're going to work on our vision. So you can leave it there. So we are going to be working on these 4 frames, the 4 sides of the frame. And then once we know who you are and where you are, then we can start looking at where we're going. So we'll be creating once we've kind of... So markers and whiteboards, this is the need.
Yeah, anybody would like to donate a whiteboard?
Yeah, all right. You were a talented guy. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. So once we have our frame and we've firmly established who you are, then inside that frame, we'll begin to work on what does that look like for the future. I'm not a drawer, and the pen. Can you imagine a frame? Okay. It's not hard. There we go. Not a very good one. So once we are settled with our mission and our values and our strategies and what we want to measure to make sure we're on, then we start to see, once we're firmly kind of rooted in who we are, then we're going to start dreaming, starting at 90 days, 1 year, 3 years, 5 years. And what are the key milestones we need to hit to become any of those? So we have if anybody watch Bob Ross, the painter, love that guy, rest his soul. But he would always start with the background, right? So he's got mountains and streams, trees, and he would always start with the background. Who do we want to be? Where do we want to go? Let's dream about that together. So that'll become your long distance one. And what are the things you need to hit in order to get there? So if we need to hit Omaha by 6 p.m. tonight, we need to get going. And we need to be in La Crosse by, right? You understand what I'm saying? So from there, then we create kind of long range and then back it up to what do we need to do in the next 90 days to start living this dream. And know that I'm a firm believer in making sure that this matches your imaginations. Now, not everybody can have editorial control, but we want people to have feedback and ways to give input. So we'll come back at all kinds of different spots to make sure that you understand what the process that we went through. You understand how the team has been working on making sure we name these things. So the most important things about Good Shepherd stay. The crucial core. What keeps Good Shepherd, but helps you let go of the things that might be in your way or help turn your focus to something that might have more impact. So we're going to be coming back with you to check in, making sure we're kind of on the right track. And then as we start to dream and move forward, and this will probably turn into a strategic plan at some point, but it is a vision that will help shape your resources, your staffing, your building use, your budget, your committees, your time, your prayer life as a congregation. Does that make sense? What questions do you have? Look at that. And I can travel so I can hear you. Raise your hand if any of the affirmations or challenges were a surprise to you. What was a surprise? Huh? Sorry? Oh, the welcoming. Yeah, depending on when you joined the church, you thought it was more welcoming or less welcoming. And I think the people who have joined the church recently would say it's not as. Yes.
Just talk to him. Just
When you had the circles drawn up there, the Y that is in the center, I'm wondering if people who are coming to our church in that circle, the Y, are coming here because of our how, or not the how, the outside, whatever that one was.
Yep.
They've heard about us and they believe in what we're doing and they're coming because of that.
Yes. So you heard the question. So sometimes people come because we have great whats or hows, right? You have good programs. Right? So not to discount those, but not that those are it for you. You have a holy purpose that's driving those. So as you plan or think, you just want to make sure we keep the holy purpose in mind as we kind of look at those ministries. Absolutely, people come in through some of those ministries, but we don't want them to get lost thinking that's it. There is a transformational relationship with Jesus Christ to be had here. And if we leave them in those whats, we have not done our job. Yeah? Maybe you don't like that. That's okay. Yep, up here.
Do you know when specifics would be coming?
Yeah, I think we're going to be gathering those groups. Thank you. It's like we planned that because that's a good. So I would like to get those two teams going probably in the next month and do some training and get our path together probably in July or August and get those going so that they're in full swing by fall so we can really I would imagine the leadership piece is going to be a little shorter than the vision piece. That's going to take a few months. So if you are interested, Rick, my sidekick, has some sign-ups for people who are interested either in leadership or shared vision, who would like to give input or stay appraised or be considered for some kind of involvement in those two areas. So feel free to sign up.
In the narthex,
Outside in the narthex.
if you want to sign up.
Does anything surprise you, disappoint you? Are you in agreement that there's still a little bit of loss and sadness here? Grief? Yeah. Anything else surprise you? Quiet group. Yes, sir.
And inspiring worship.
Yeah.
I think that's exciting.
It is exciting. And not everybody said that, but enough that I figured out it was a pattern. And there was an interesting mix of age groups, which I thought was interesting. But I would say there is a recognition that your faith life is not as mature as a congregation as it could be. And so wanting to make sure we continue to shape lives of faith that are really rooted in study, learning, that kind of thing. Yep.
I come from a school of thought that says everything will rise or fall based on leadership. I'm definitely, a fan of getting people on board through the committee process and things of that nature. But how does the idea of a shared vision, how does that relate to the idea that, everything, groups of people, whether that's a business or a church or organizations of any type, it's so dependent on leadership. How does that relate to the idea of shared vision?
Great question. It won't go unless there's leaders who are on board, who support it, who are lined up, and that all the systems, right? So our clergy, our board, our committees, our staff, our laity, and our plan are all in alignment. It won't go. So we need to make sure that we are thoughtful about a vision that isn't necessarily what's here today, but where we want to go, and that might be some stretching for you. But I agree that's an area that we got to watch in terms of making sure our leaders are on board and equipped and have the right trajectory. Does that make sense?
Where's the microphone? There it is. That last word you said, as it relates to trajectory, is that the leader's responsibility to set trajectory, or is that somehow going to be arrived at with a shared vision?
The shared vision will set the way, but the people who are responsible for making sure the vision becomes, move into it, would be the board and the pastoral leadership. Yep. Anybody disappointed? Excited? The ALC-LCA? Yeah.
2 minutes.
Yep.
I'm asking Kristin if she would rehearse the history of what that culture change of leadership being, more top-down vision casting, and then people decide whether they're in or out of that versus what a shared vision, shared leadership looks like, and why that's a newer conversation for us.
So in 1988, the ELCA was formed out of 3 church bodies. The 2 bigger ones were the ALC, American Lutheran Church, and the LCA, Lutheran Church in America. I know, why do we have such silly names? But the culture of those 2 churches were very, very, very different. And I spoke earlier about the style of leadership that your past leaders or your past pastors had, your former pastors had, was very much in keeping with the LCA, which was the pastor typically in those, and I have a lot of LCA churches, or former LCA churches. The pastor in those days was the chair of the board and the senior pastor. So it was very heavy on the senior pastor to set direction, to cast vision, to create kind of agendas to move forward. And ALC, in contrast, was very congregational-centric. They didn't like anybody telling them what to do as a congregation. So pastors were just here for a while, serving us, and then they were going to move on. So when I joined my ALC church in 2002, The pastor's name wasn't even on the website because he works for us, and we're just us, and he'll come and go, or they'll come and go. So very different ways about the center of authority, the power, right? And who sets direction. So you have come from a time where it was very appropriate and very kind of culturally norm to have a pastor who is kind of setting direction and so forth. But for a variety of reasons, we have found that churches that can really embrace lay leadership, lay vision, and kind of work together to make that, they're healthier. A, we got a huge pastor shortage, and it's only going to get worse. B, the exercise of owning the faith and the ministry is good for the people. So in places where you're really owning it and taking it and running with it are really key. But you haven't had a long history of exercising those muscles. So in some ways, you're just kind of coming to the gym, as Pastor Chris was doing the children's sermon. It's going to take some time to develop those muscles, to have the kind of leadership systems and everything working. But that's what we'll work on, to getting everything going, all V8 going in the same direction. But that's a helpful thing for you to know about yourselves as history goes. That is shifting even in churches where they used to be LCA. They're kind of all moving to lay-led congregations, more lay input.
Since we're one church, two locations, if you noticed any cultural differences or other differences between the two locations?
Absolutely, absolutely. So when we say shared vision, that's going to have to live in the fact that you have two extremely different churches. And even within those churches, every worship service really is its own congregation. So unless you got a lot of people crossing over, we need to be thoughtful that there's pockets of people, right? But very different context, extremely different, I would say, vibe and style, and very different needs out there. If you went to the Verona community panel, very different needs. Important, but very different. So you can't really treat this as just one plan. That vision's going to have to include very specific goals and priorities because you're really living with two expressions. Oops. Yeah.
So they can have one shared vision? You don't need two?
Or it may be that the shared vision is we have two visions, right? I'm flexible.
I was shocked with the one that said the strong outreach in our community or in our neighborhood right here. I think there's so much more opportunity. And I know we had the listening panels. Are those still available online? And
I think so. Yes. For anyone who's interested, those panels, those community panels where you were talking with the neighbors in each location, those are still available to watch online. I think they're video, yes? Yep, they're video. Fascinating. Fascinating. Couple more, and then I sense that you might be hungry.
Okay. Hold it like this?
Yep.
Yay. One of the things I'm familiar with congregations that are congregationally centered rather than ministerial centered is that what you have been calling committees have been called missions.
Right. Or ministry teams. Or
our ministry team, our mission group.
Or mission groups, yep.
So to get when you talk about committees, you're talking about like a business where there's a head and it comes from the head down.
Right.
When you talk about a mission, you talk about what moves you to be involved with this group.
Right. Much more, so her point was that when you have a congregation that's really engaging lay people in the work, these ministry teams or mission teams, the sense is that it's bubbling up from the bottom as opposed to being imposed from on top. Yes? Yep. Watch Rick run.
Who wanted it?
We got time for one more, and then we're going to go eat. So what you can expect from me is a summary to be posted in all kinds of different places, not unsimilar to what you got. You will have a full report in the office that you can look at with other people to hear all the details. I was here a few weeks ago and spent 3 some hours with leadership digging through the data. So they have a really strong sense about what went into those. You will also hear about the Waypoint teams, the shared vision and the leadership Waypoint team. If you're interested, see Rick. The signups are out there. if you're interested in getting to do that. Otherwise, keep your eyes open and listen carefully to what might be blowing around here as the Spirit moves and we start to shape a vision for the future.